everybody, and welcome to our Wii Edu breakfast chat. I have Vic here with us from Now Ed Puzzle. Morning, Vic.
Good morning.
And I'm Philippa Raithmell, and this is Wii Edu Chats, where today we are really excited to have Gillian Hammond, who's going to be joining us. She is the principal of the Repton School in Abu Dhabi, soon to be the principal for a year at the Repton Abu Dhabi School as well. And we are here today to listen to her Wii Edu story and how she became such an iconic woman in leadership in the Middle East.
Okay, welcome, Gillian.
Morning, everybody. Nice to see you guys. Philippa, especially nice to see you again.
Yeah,
old friends.
Fantastic to have you.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
How long since you two last worked together?
Gosh, Philippa, 3 years.
3 years. Yeah,
3 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then
and
still in touch with different projects and following on Twitter and what have you. And Philippa is always like a little bird on my shoulder, constantly saying, I wasn't going to say devil then or little angel, but she's there saying,
somewhere in between.
I think so. It depends whether she's telling me off or not, or she just reminded me of something. But yeah, I'm always thinking, oh goodness, Philippa would laugh at me now that I'm not doing this tech thing right, or I've forgotten how to do this, because I would always be reaching out to Philippa for advice on different things. So yes, I miss working with them all.
Oh, well, that's a great intro for Philippa then.
Thank you. No, and I think one of the reasons that I think it's really important for us to have you on here as well is the fact that you are somebody who definitely has shaped my kind of leadership journey as well. And also I know that you definitely shape the leadership journeys of many women and other leaders within the Middle East. And I think that's fantastic. And it's so great to be able to highlight people who are really making a difference, because Repton itself has gone from strength to strength since you were there as first, obviously, the head and then the principal. So I guess without further ado, we would love to know how you made it to Repton and what your Wii Edu story is.
So, well, thank you for those kind words to start with. I'm delighted to hear you say that. I started out as a science graduate and went into industry initially, and became completely disillusioned with the pharmaceutical industry, unfortunately, and started to think about what else I wanted to do. And I actually looked into joining the police or becoming a teacher at exactly the same time. And I had applications into both. I went and did several stages of joining the police force. And I had a conversation with a neighbor who was telling me some horror stories, actually, unfortunately, about policing. And at the same time, I was thinking at the back of my mind, but how am I going to use my science knowledge? I love science, and I still am really passionate about science, particularly women in science, actually, because there is a gender bias still there. And so I ended up, when I had the interview to go through teacher training, doing that. And it was the best thing I ever did. And I think I sometimes see tweets by people who are obviously going through a tough time, talking about they can't wait to get out of education, or they're going to retire early, or the stress levels and so on. And I feel really bad for them, because actually I think it's such an incredible profession. We're so honored to be in it and to be able to shape minds and the futures of all of our young people. There's never a day the same. It is never boring. I constantly laugh in the workplace with staff or the SLT, or particularly the children. If ever I'm sat here and having a dreadful day, I'll go out onto the playground and go and do a duty somewhere, because you just can't fault the energy levels and the excitement. And so I think we're very lucky. So I very fortunately went into teaching, and in my teaching practice, I was very mindful about the practices I wanted to do. And I chose, you could find them yourself or you could be given them. And so typical Jill, probably, I decided, I'm going to find my own. I want to be, determine my own destiny. So I got on the phone and I rang around a few places, and I went to a special needs school for my first block practice. And the classroom pedagogy, the training, behavior management that I learned there was second to none. And I would encourage any NQTs to do that if you get the opportunity. And then I went into an inner city school. And I still have colleagues who work there, who I worked with at the time. And I was very, very lucky that I had leaders around me who acknowledged hard work and passion, and encouraged people to literally shoot for the stars. And Sir John Jones was the head at the time. And I'd been there a couple of years. I'd become a head of year, and then I became assistant head of sixth form. And through a lot of hard work, I started as guidance tutor in the sixth form, but it was really hidden and disguised as me starting to become something else, and all whilst teaching science. And I remember John Jones, Sir John, asking me to sign up for MPQH. And I remember at the time, and this is an interesting thing, and I love Leslie, and I've never actually said this out loud, but I remember her saying to me, she was head of science, and she said, wait, he's asked you to do the MPQH? And she was really, really surprised at this. And I, little dent to the ego, but actually I understood that. I'd only been in teaching a couple of years, and I had to sort of say, yeah, I'm not sure why he's done that, but hopefully it's because he sees something in me and trust that I'll do a good job at this. And it was so fascinating because Leslie had a huge impact on my career, and certainly forged how I would want to run a science department, which I later did in Italy. But she also showed me great leadership in that I actually became her line manager. So at the same time as she was my boss in science, because I was assistant head in sixth form and she was one of the tutors there. So we had this really interesting conversation when she was doing my performance review, and she said, Jill, you're actually my boss now, but we're still doing this. And so it was a really fascinating relationship to go through, actually. And I appreciate
what a dynamic, right? Yeah.
It was a really interesting dynamic. She'd had 20 years in the game. She was a far more experienced teacher and an outstanding teacher, by the way. I mean, the things I learned from watching her, not only in the classroom, but in leading a department, were incredible. So I'm very fortunate for that. And then I went to Italy, and I knew I was only going for a year as head of science department. And I remember, again, the encouragement from the SLT that I'd just left. They very much, I thought I was in trouble. They asked me to meet with them in the last week before I was leaving. And they made me promise not to stay away in the international field for too long. They thought I was going to ruin my career, which they actually said to me, you must come back after a year, Gillian. If you go for longer, you won't get back into an SLT role. You'll be out of touch. So that, that was interesting advice. And I came back, though, as assistant vice principal in a girls' school in Liverpool. And Belvedere Academy was absolutely fascinating because it was a private girls' day school trust school. And we converted it into an academy, which was the first in the country to become an academy. So the parents suddenly didn't have to pay fees. And you can imagine the impact that had on the community.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So I would probably say 80% were delighted, but there were some who had wanted it to stay more privileged, and they wanted the girls to have to sit assessment tests, and they didn't want the diversity to be created within that community.
Right, just
saw the benefits
kind of idea.
Yeah. So, and again, had a really, I'd say that I felt that was my first senior leadership role, really. And when I reflect on that, I remember the principal, he infuriated me and I didn't understand it. And I had to keep thinking about it later. He said to me that he didn't think I was being myself. And he said to me, it's like you're being Mary Poppins and we don't really know you. And it really, really hurt me at the time. And I didn't see it, but I completely think he was right now. And I think if ever I was to give any advice to anybody in their first leadership role or even later on, is that what I was trying to do was emulate other people. I was trying to be the assistant vice principal that people thought I should be. I was trying to behave in that way, talk in that
way. Title rather than being Gillian, right?
I was trying to be the title, yes.
Yeah.
So he was spot on. And whilst I still like to think I did a really good job and I worked really, really hard and I learned an awful lot, I think I'm a better SLT member now because of the reflection I did after that piece of advice that hurt at the time that I couldn't understand. But I definitely wasn't being my authentic self. And I think that is the biggest piece of advice I would give to any leader, whatever field that is, but particularly in a school, because it's such an emotive profession, is you have to get to the point where actually you just think, tough, and you're just going to have to accept me for how I am. we all make mistakes along the way, but know that if I make some, I'm going to apologize to you. But along the way, we're going to have these open and honest chats. And I'm just going to have this sense of humor that I hope is appropriate most of the times. But I'm a human as well. And I think since I've been more like that and I've shown my vulnerable side, or I've shared personal things with them, which I've always been quite locked down about, I think my teams have got better and better. And I'm certainly happier in the workplace.
And I think that's really hard, isn't it, as a female in leadership, to kind of, because you get those sort of stereotypical people who are hard as nails, women who have no feeling, and that's how they got into leadership. When actually, it shouldn't be that way at all. And it's really interesting that it's taken time as well for you to be able to feel that you can be that kind of authentic, really, isn't it? It's
it
definitely
really did. Sorry, and I'm so pleased for that, because I think I personally now, I still love getting up and going to work. I still do enjoy that. I don't have a dread, when people are coming back from holidays and I socialize with other people and they're like, oh, we've got to go back to work tomorrow. I still genuinely really love it, because what we do is so important and we're such a great team. I got here through an interesting route. I from that school went down to Brighton, and that was a tough gig, and it was fascinating to see the transformation you can make with the community when they get behind you. We had a really interesting demographic with a lot of deprivation, and I think people assumed that schools in Brighton were all outstanding because of the vicinity to the capital, and they were not. There were 7 failing schools when I was there, and a lot of hard work has been done to correct that for the children, and it's in a really, really great place now. But it was there I learned how to set up an academy, a sports academy, and a sixth form again. I set up another sixth form. And then I think I came out here. Yes, I did, because I was working with the principal there. She is somebody who, I think when I look back over my career, Phil Hogg, she has had the greatest impact on me, and me being a female leader in education. As I think about Philippa sometimes with technology, I do often think, what would Phil do, or what would she say? Not as often anymore, which means I've probably grown my wings a little bit more. But she was my mentor for a long time, and she came and worked out in Abu Dhabi to do 1 year before she retired, and then she ended up working for ADEC and stayed here longer, and I came out to work with her. So that's ultimately how my Abu Dhabi journey started.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to hear all those different parts of your journey, because although we've worked together, I haven't ever heard the full sort of story. But things like the police training, I can definitely see that you walking around Repton. But in terms of things like your first placement of working in a special needs school, and it's something that's so needed in this country, the awareness and to build that understanding into schools. And it's such a big part of actually doing your PGCs and NQTs now. I think there was even something going to the Parliament to say that it needs to be part of the actual the learning in terms of the PGCE assessment across that. If you're doing a teacher degree, it has to be a full module, because at the moment it still isn't. But I guess what I mean is, when I think about the school that you're in now, and Repton and the EKI schools, that is such a big part of it. Was that something that drew you to those schools, or did it just happen to be something that was quite nicely balanced when you arrived? Because it definitely, to me, they're a very inclusive school.
Yeah, they are. And I think it was a couple of things actually with Repton. I missed desperately being part of a community again. And I missed Abu Dhabi. I'd been out here before. And I kind of had a picture of what I wanted for my next role. And I wanted it to be promotion, or an opportunity for promotion. I'd been the head teacher of senior school, the founding head in a GEMS school in Abu Dhabi previously. And again, that was an interesting experience, a very different experience, but it gave me a true insight into local schools in Abu Dhabi and the authorities and the different hurdles that we go through in relation to policy. And it didn't put me off. And so when I was looking for a school to come back to, the fact that this school was going through a period of growth, it was, it's built Fry campus. When I spoke to the former principal, he was wanting help with writing the timetables and the staffing of this and the upscale of it. You know, you start with, it was 100, Philippa, you'll remember, 183 students at Fry campus. And across the school now we're at 1771. Wow. So it's grown tremendously, and I wanted to be part of that and to be able to.
In what time period is that? How many years is that?
So 4 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. So and as soon as I had my interview, I had an interview in London with board members and the recruitment agents, and then I came out here, and as soon as I walked into Repton Rose campus, our other campus just down the road from this Fry campus, I loved it. It's very bespoke baby camp. You know, it's for our little ones, it's for our young ones. They were immaculate in their uniform. They were talking to me so politely. Aaron Smith, who is our head teacher junior, he was here then, and he had created this panel of students to interview me. And we had such a laugh. These children were hilarious. And he'd chucked a special needs student onto that panel who was dominating the time and was talking over the other students and was only wanting my attention. And so it was a really clever strategy as well. So I was able to work with this young man in ensuring that we listened to the other students and I could answer the other students' questions as well. So it was a very good tactic that Aaron had used, but I loved my day there, and I couldn't stop talking to everybody who I saw as I was going around the campus. There was a great energy there, and the parents were phenomenally supportive, and I just knew. So I hadn't even seen Fry campus, and we didn't have any of the older students or hadn't really met a lot of staff, but I just absolutely knew that this was the direction. The school was going in the right direction. Its aspirations were spot on. And then when I joined, we kind of all agreed there was a certain percentage that we wanted of students who had differing needs and would need additional support, because diversity comes in many forms, right? It isn't just about nationality, but it is around ways of thinking. And that really excited me. So, and we continue to maintain that. So yes, students sit a CAT exam so that we've got a baseline for them, but it is not an entry exam. And we make sure that we are diverse because we know that we each learn from that, and everybody has different strengths. And we have a growth mindset. So we get better at things, and we don't know everything yet, but we will practice those skills and get better and better.
So you've said a lot of we in there, we're doing this, we're doing that, but how much when they talk about to grow a school at that kind of rate, a lot of that aspiration is from what you implemented. So to get in those 4 years at Repton and before you go on to the next one, can you look back on a particular project or initiative that you would say that you were proudest of in those 4 years, or that you did to create that culture, I guess?
That's a really great question. I think I'm proudest most of the culture at the school, if I'm honest. Everybody mentions it. I hope people, and they say they do, they feel an atmosphere. It feels warm. We call each other family. So our parents refer to themselves as we're a Repton family. I did very purposely in the beginning ask staff, Philippa, you will have been there in the inset, and I thought, does this sound really, I don't know, really too prescriptive? But I remember asking people, these are campuses, not sites. We are Rose and Fry. We are not foundation and senior. And so there was very specific language I wanted us to use. We're a family. We're a team. So there were really specific.
I remember there was no pupils. Nobody pointing at your eye.
No pupils.
And I've never heard that before.
I think that's brilliant. I think language like that is so important. It's really, really important. And you look at successful startups and the language that they use and the terms that they use, and it really does make a difference. And even in some of the roles where I've started, and there's sort of, especially when I first got into education, like these terms that I'd never heard before in my life. And that's, why do we call it that? This is, everybody else calls it this, but it just, because that's what we've always done. It's really hard. And everyone's worked out what it means, but an outsider will come in and be like, what? None of this.
And we're RAD, Repton Abu Dhabi, and the kids could get behind that and what our vision was, and very just some simple corporate things as well. The notice boards, we have a blue background and a gold board, and it was so very simple but very prescriptive things, but it meant that we were working together on certain things, and we had this commonality and this common language when we were talking to family members. And We also have, the growth mindset was a massive part of that. Digital technology and being digitally fluent, and Philippa was a huge part in embedding and developing that, but also in wellness and well-being. So we actually have a very large wellness committee now, and we have some great fun with some of the activities that we do that shows staff we love and appreciate them, and that we are here for them. And it can be, we work 182 days in the calendar year. We have 183 off. So, when you put it in that perspective, yes, we work really, really hard for all of our students, and we want to show that we love and appreciate, but likewise, we do have a lot of time off, and we expect those high standards. But it's good.
We're both on the corporate side now, and we're like, oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah. In education, seriously, it's amazing. We do have the best job in the world, and I am the proudest principal. And so I think the thing I'm most proud of, going back to your question, it could be, oh well, the building is now fully used on both Rose and Pride campus. It could be that we're opening up to year 13 in summer, Philippa, so we've got all of the year groups now planned for. But it isn't. It is the culture around the school. It's the manners and the behavior.
The results of what you've implemented, right? The fact that the school is now full is as a result of these changes that you've made at the beginning. So having to go back and actually create those changes, because it takes a while. It's a ripple effect, right? It'll take a while for that to grow.
And being consistent. Being really consistent, and I think that's really important in terms of your leadership. So I guess let's flip that. So you're going to be moving to a new campus, still obviously part of the EKA family, but how does that feel? How does it? I mean, so you're stepping away, but only for a certain amount of time, correct?
Yeah.
Are there traits that you feel you'll need to take across? Do you feel that they're quite consistent? What are your kind of aspirations for the next year?
Copy paste, surely copy paste.
It's fascinating, Victoria, and I've consciously thought about this, that actually I'll need to be very, very careful to not just copy paste. And because one of the things that I think we're so successful here is that, we have 92 different nationalities. We've got to know and love our families, and they know and trust us. And that is because it's a genuine partnership. And I think the staff have been on a journey with us, our growth journey all together. And the students they've seen that and they've loved it. And Repton Abu Dhabi is wanting to grow. We need to grow our senior school, and we're very, very excited about that over there. And so there's a huge journey to go on that the community need to go on as well. And I want to be very consciously careful of saying, well, at Repton Abu Dhabi, because I'm so biased, and I constantly compete against my sister schools. I'm in board meetings, and I'm constantly like delighted when we win certain things, or when we get praised for certain things, or we're going to use this as exemplary. And that's what I'm so Repton through and through. They never thought I would consider doing this, if I'm honest. And but ultimately I'm Repton, and I can see what I think Reptonians should be like, and I know it works. So I'm going to avoid saying at Repton Abu Dhabi we do. So we're going to do that.
A lot of people off very quickly if you use this phrase, overuse this phrase.
I think so. So I'm going to avoid doing that. But I might say at our sister schools they've tried this, or in our family this is what we do, or as Reptonians this is what we expect and what we should
actually
do.
Having that brand behind you means that you can, it's kind of, you just help it. They need to get on the bus. This is the Repton bus. You're either on it or you're not.
You're right. And let's not reinvent the wheel. And I think there needs to be a lot of honesty about that, and something that we've really focused on, and it's been really, really successful in the last sort of 12-18 months, particularly because of COVID, is that we've hooked up our heads of department across our family of schools, including in the UK. So the Repton family of schools, like heads of year. So there's a head of year 5 meeting coming up, and I'm invited to come to that one because of something particular they want to talk about. And they love that, because now they can just pick up the phone to each other and say, oh, what are you doing about this? Or what have you done for this project or this scheme of work? Or so it isn't, we traditionally had tried to do it with heads of department, but we're doing it with all middle leaders now. And we have a bespoke middle leadership training course as well that we're delivering across the group, which is a really exciting new development. We have a lot of expertise in-house, and we don't want to outsource that. And we want to, our colleagues are very loyal to us and hardworking, and we want to offer something back. And to maintain that high retention rates are, most of our schools are over 85-87% retention with staff and students. So
that's a really impressive statistics.
Yeah.
I speak to schools about retention statistics an awful lot, so in my previous role, and that's really, really impressive.
Yeah, we're really happy with that. So I think they feel looked after, and I think they feel they've got opportunities. I think I haven't always spotted it all of the time with people, and I think I've really tried to push some people sometimes, and it hasn't worked out, and and I have to take some responsibility for that. But I think everybody should feel recognized in their efforts and in their talents. And my job first with the senior leaders is to make sure they've all got opportunities. So it's hilarious at the moment. I have their jobs on my board, what each SLT member is responsible for, and I look at it, I'm like, who's responsible for which? And they've all started coming to me already because they know this is the time of year when I rewrite that. And so next year they'll have something slightly different, because my job is to prepare them for being a principal. And unless you have had the opportunity to cover the pastoral sides and all of the curriculum sides, and you need that. You need those experiences. So they're trying to barter and get ready at the moment for what they want and don't want.
That does lead quite nicely into the question about what piece of advice would you give someone who an aspirational female leader coming up in the ranks? What would your biggest piece of advice be?
I think, first of all, don't let anybody tell you that age is a thing on a CV or interview, or because you can have 15 years of experience and be rubbish at your job. And you can in any profession, right? So it shouldn't mean that you can be in your job 2 years but not be ready and not be good at a promotion opportunity. So don't ever think to yourself that you can't apply for something because I've only been doing the job for this amount of time, because you might have previous experience that you can bring to that role that's not necessarily in the education field. And you just might be really, really awesome and can do that, and have the energy and have, the knowledge and the passion. And so that's really important. And I think tied in with that, I've mentioned it already, is to really be your authentic self, because my biggest lesson, it really is. And I think when I started being more naturally me, I think it was easier. I mean, why do you want to try and be something different? But also it just meant that people found it easier to relate, because I think particularly a female in leadership, and there's a lady, Dr. Andrews, she did an article and in Forbes actually, and she wrote about it, and this is my soapbox thing I wanted to talk to you guys about. It really irritates me.
Good. Please do. Yes,
I'd love
to. Go for it. Why are women so mean to other women? And it drives me crazy, particularly women in leadership. I think there's often a bit of suspicion. Well, why is she doing that, and how she got there? And there is a sense of other women not bringing other women up. And this Dr. Andrews, she wrote this Forbes article about it. It's amazing. And there is there's a hidden natural law apparently. And there's a lady called Hammond and her colleagues, where she describes it as you need this break-even rule between women in relation to what is the perceived power levels and what is their self-esteem, for them to truly be positive relationships between women. And there's a little bit of, some women will be, well, I got here, you can work it out yourself. Sometimes there are places where there's more males, and so actually having females in power roles isn't always appreciated, and it creates a mindset where people think and start acting like that. Sometimes there's a lot of competition because there's so few female roles.
The sort of room at the top theory,
the room at the top. And so it's super, super interesting. And I forget our original question why we were talking about this, because I went off on my soapbox.
Keep going on your soapbox, please. Take your time.
It's down to me being, I've got friends, and even my mom, God love me, mom, don't listen to this, she'll be cross. But sometimes I hear them say, oh, look at the state of her, and why is she wearing that? Or that's not very flattering. Or I've got friends that have
not about you, right?
Not about
no, but imagine that in a Somerset accent, and that's my mum as well. I think that's an awful lot of people's mums.
And
absolutely, 100%.
So I'm sure that they do it behind my back as well. But I can't bear hearing that. So I'll be oh, good on her for rocking that. God, I wish I had that confidence. I try and compensate, and I go the other way. So even I'll be like, oh, but look, she's got beautiful hair, or oh my God, isn't that color gorgeous? Or so I flat just ignore those comments and on purpose try and come up with just something amazingly positive about that woman.
Anything,
because I cannot bear it. And I think, unfortunately, in the industry, I think in probably a lot of industries, I faced it a little bit in the science industry when I was there. I have definitely faced it in the education industry. I think sometimes men and women in leadership roles are just so busy doing just the day-to-day tasks and our jobs that we don't mean to forget the relationship aspects sometimes. We just don't. And I think women are typically labeled with, and I'm generalizing here, with higher EQ, more empathy, those more interpersonal relationship skills than a man. And so when you compare a man in a leadership role and a woman in a senior leadership role, if those people are just busy and distracted and forget to make time to do those things, those interpersonal relationships, or they don't feel they've got time, the woman is the one criticized because people still expect to see those traits from her. Whereas the man, oh, well, he's just being the boss, and he's just such a busy person, and there's no wonder. I think there's a lot more forgiveness there sometimes, and it's not saying that we shouldn't remember these things, but I think sometimes women are mean to other women when they can't relate. And they can't relate because there are these natural traits that I think are gender specific sometimes. We can still grow them all. We can still learn different traits and different skills. But there are some general ones there that we are still going through an evolution about that we expect from each other. And I think women particularly find other women difficult to relate to if there's a lot of difference, if there's a perceived level imbalance in power or imbalance in self-esteem. And it's a shame.
Go back to, so because you were talking about when you went to do your MPQH, that was actually someone approached you and said you should go down this route. Like, so someone suggested it to you, and then someone who had been in the role a lot longer in your science department, right, had then been like sort of unusual. So, but do you feel like some of that still stems, and I guess some of the inauthentic behaviors that you said that you went through came from the fact that someone else had said, well, you should go for this because maybe you still had a little bit of that. It's like, oh, me, is that, like, really? Like, and so we can look back now and say that we shouldn't have this kind of imposter syndrome, or that we should have that self-confidence and self-belief. But actually, when someone does approach you, there's got to be quite a sort of strange transition period there, which I should imagine feeds into, what you're saying now as well about.
I think so. And I think, thank God for people that do spot that. And I hope that I have done that, and I hope that I have approached people and said, I think you're ready for this, I think you should do this. Really? But equally, I've also had to have difficult conversations and say, I'm not sure yet, and I think this is something else, or please think about this first, and then they're not easy conversations to have either. It's much more exciting when you can do it the other way. But I think I've been lucky that I've worked with very different leaders myself. I've had very strong characters, male and female, and what the MPQH taught me to do, and I've done this with a few leaders here actually, I'm trying to look where mine is. I've got this old book that is literally from 2005 when I did my MPQH, and one of the things a tutor there told us to do was to note down leadership behaviors, things that leaders did, good and bad, that were good examples and bad examples of leadership. And it's fascinating when you start doing that, you start watching people. Sometimes you kind of go, that's not how I tackle that. But actually, you can look at the impact, or you see something and you think, oh, that was such a great idea. Sir John Jones, I remember we used to do a staff briefing and everybody would listen, and there was tea and toast in there. If somebody walked in late, he would just stop dead mid-sentence, just turn and look, and then turn back and carry on. And he didn't even need to say anything, but you just knew that, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And it was enough said. He never had to approach that. And then he'd be like, are you all right? And he'd be completely fine with them. He wasn't sulking with them, or he was sending a message not just to that person, but to the whole team that it's not okay. People are in here and they're waiting. And so just tiny things like that. When you start watching, it's fascinating. It's really great.
Yeah. So without then going over without name checking, I guess. So what you talked about, I guess, the difference between being an outstanding teacher. So what do you think the biggest difference is between just being an absolutely amazing teacher and then being an amazing leader or having the potential to be an amazing leader? What do you recognize? What are those qualities that you recognize?
I think so I think you move from having an absolute passion for your subject, which I still do. I'm still an absolute science boffin. I love science and I still get really, really excited about it and want to get involved in all of those practicals and research and so on. And I like breaking down the barrier of that scientists don't look like you typically might think scientists look like. And I think in leadership then, I think you're a good leader if you're passionate about student advocacy. If actually everything that you do, you can question you and your teams around us. Is this what is best for the child? Is this what is best for the children? And unfortunately, sometimes you have to answer that question where it's best for the children. It's not necessarily best for the staff. But I can rest okay with that most of the times because we pay staff to do a job. And if we are also showing that we love and appreciate them and we have a lot of mechanisms in place to take care of their well-being, if I have to say sometimes this decision rests with the children and what is best for the children, then I'm okay doing that over and over again because my job ultimately, and it's part of what my personal vision is that I've written about it in my biography and things like that, that I want children to love coming to school every day. Not just think it's okay, but literally love and want to come to school every day. And I get such a buzz from it when I talk to children about, oh, did you have a nice holiday? And honestly, Reptonians say to me, yes, but I wanted to come back to school, or yes, but I was excited yesterday because we were coming back. And parents say, they've had to stop their child from coming in when they were poorly because they really wanted to come to school and they didn't want to miss this, this, and this. And that just, we're doing it right if children are wanting to come to school. And then as an added benefit, if staff actually want to come to school, then
does it translate then as long as your teachers feel the same way?
Exactly.
I think it does. And I think happy, empowered teachers leads to happy, empowered children. I think there's a natural filter down there that you can't deny. But it's also in reverse because, you're always going to have the odd day. You're going to have an odd day of where you're a bit grumpy or something's going on. But ultimately, when a staff member feels like that, I say, oh, but aren't our children amazing? And oh, but have you had a nice day with such and such a body? And oh, but are you looking forward to this? And it can kind of just bring you back round and put things back into context that we are in the most privileged position to work with such amazing children the way we do. So
Thank you. So I guess to wrap up, do you have a book or a podcast or something that you'd like to share with our Wii Edu audience that has something that's guided you or that just inspires you or you just enjoy?
I think so. I've got it here, and I don't know if you'll see it if I pull it up here. So Matthew Syed, Rebel Ideas. But what so I love this book because Matthew in this book, I think really, really cleverly talks about, and in a really simple way, something that I think I've always instinctively known is that you need to build your team around you where people are quite different, and they might not seem that different to other people, but when you know them and when you're looking for additional senior leader members, it's not a clone you're looking for. You need to find people that have skills that you don't, that complement my skills or complement the vice principal's skills and so on. And he refers to something that he's coined as the collective intelligence and talking about cognitive diversity. And I think that's so clever because otherwise you get something called collective blindness. Now, we're heading to be a world-class school. We want the best for every child by providing them with a world-class school. We've written what our aims are that actually act as KPIs to becoming that. And after I'd read this a couple of years ago now, it really did help me to think that you can have collective blindness in any institution or in any workplace where it works. So why change it? We don't need to keep looking outward. We don't need to make any drastic changes. But we do, because things move on. And Philippa, you helped us to see that here. Technology and the children's skills and their ideas and passions and interests and jobs and careers they're going into are changing so rapidly that we have to stay ahead of the game. And you can't stay ahead of the game if you have this collective blindness of what we're doing is okay and we don't need to look externally for any other ideas. So we are constantly challenging each other's thinking and looking at other world-class schools around the world. What are they doing differently? What do we predict is coming up? What might excite our children in 5 years' time, 10 years' time? So you can't sit on your laurels. You can't just achieve outstanding and sit there. You've got to keep coming up with new and exciting things for your community and for the children. So his book really helps you to think about that. I also want to say he also writes for children. And Matthew's books are amazing. There's one called Dare to Be You, talking about be your own superhero, which is awesome. I just think so powerful in this day and age. And there's one called You Are Awesome, and it talks about let your kindness loose. And I just think that they're brilliant. They're really nicely written. I think children can access them, but I think even better if a parent or guardian reads with their child through those two books. Really opens up some conversations. So Matthew Syed and Philippa, you know of a podcast that I loved, and it was got hooked. And I know you got hooked on it as well. So there's a podcast called The Serial that's written by Serial, and there's Sarah Cognick, one of the journalists there. She's incredible, and she looks into the case of Adnan Syed. So, but that's a personal like. But oh my goodness, this book I read recently called Where the Crawdads Sing. It's completely off education, and I don't know. It's fiction. But Delia Owens wrote Where the Crawdads Sing, and I saw a lady reading it by the pool over the recent break, and I just had to go and speak to her and say, "Are you loving the book?" Because I couldn't put it down. So I'd listened to it as an audio book, and actually the audiobook is brilliant because they do this Southern American twang in it that kind of helps bring the characters to life as well. But it's an incredible book. If you don't want something to read professionally, for me, Where the Crawdads Sing has made a big impact.
Yeah. Definitely. And that podcast was incredible. I know we've got a murder mystery kind of.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. Serial, I was absolutely hooked on. Absolutely hooked. That and then kind of Netflix, these ones like,
And when you have such an intensive job like education, and you know the 180 days or what have you, it's so compact and it can be so busy. To have that as a breakout that you just kind of go into your own world, reading a book, listening to podcasts, I think it's really important for people. Not necessarily always about murder.
No, I know. Yeah, not always murder, but like you say, that just grab your imagination and you can really get lost in. Jeffrey Deaver, I don't know if you've read any of his books, but they're so clever. They're amazing. So
I'm really into the Richard Osman. Have you been reading the Richard Osman books, the Thursday Murder Club? These are really good. So he's the presenter of Pointless in the UK. So maybe we should take this for after the chat. So he's done 2, and this third one is like pre-order now. But yeah, this first one is Thursday Murder Club, and it's sort of a bunch of old. They're in old people's home, but like solving murders. But the writing is so funny. It's one of those books I can laugh out loud, but also like really like such a page turner, like really gripping. Sorry,
thank you.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for showing us a little bit more about you and the real Jill and the person behind the principle. So yeah, thank you very much for being our Wii Edu breakfast this month and for sharing your Wii Edu story.
You're very welcome. It's been really nice to see you again, Philippa, and to meet both of you, Victoria, as well. And Linda, thank you for that.
Thank you, Gillian. Lovely to chat. All right, till next time.
Take care, guys. Bye.